Mostyn, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
Yeah, all good, man. All good. Yeah.
So you are a former partner and head of people for 22 years at KPMG, and now the founder of Atomic Ambition, which I love the name, by the way, not just because it's got A's in it, but and you help people get clarity and define what success looks like to them. For the person listening, and I suppose imagine a bit of a scenario where someone has this burning desire inside them that they are destined to do great things in life. They're destined to kind of find that thing that they're really passionate about in the future. But right now, they're listening to this and they're like, I have no idea what I want to do in life. What's the first step, do you think, towards finding what that thing is?
I think just on that situation, I think that's most people's situation, right?
Yeah.
It was up until probably 2 or 3 years ago, that was my situation. And I think it's most situations. Most people don't have a really sort of strong purpose or passion. And they're like, okay, this is really what I want to get stuck into. This is what I want to build a career around or a life around. Don't think most people have that, at least not necessarily when they're kind of like first starting out in their careers, or possibly, even sort of 20, 30, 40 years into their careers. A lot of people just kind of fall into something. So I think if you're in that situation, it's a case of trying different things, identifying elements of, I think, the types of tasks and activities that you're doing that you actually enjoy doing. I think sometimes we can get a bit hung up on having a noble purpose, or making a dent in the world and all of that sort of stuff. And like I say, don't think most people have that. So it's a bit of a case of experimenting, noticing what works for you, actively thinking about it, having quite a lot of self-awareness in terms of the types of things that give you energy, the sort of things that drain you, and then moving closer to those things that do give you more energy, or you finish the day feeling, that was good, those sorts of things. But it's a lot of trial and error, I think. And I don't think it's a problem if you don't ever actually find what that one thing is for you. But I think if you're experimenting and you're getting more of the things that you enjoy into your life, whether that's from a career perspective or, from a personal perspective, whatever that, whatever is important to you, I think that's the more important thing for me.
I was going to challenge that quickly.
Yeah,
You said it's not necessarily important to not find the thing. And I do agree with you, to the sense that I think it's unreasonable to expect every single person in this entire world to absolutely find their passion, the thing that they are, the thing that gives them a lot of energy and maybe purpose. And like you said, they finish the day and they're like, I feel good. Like this is what I want to do. I do think that we have and maybe this is coming from a level of privilege where we live in, say, the UK and live in London, but having a responsibility to at least try, to at least go for it.
Oh yeah, you definitely want to do that, right? Because that makes. But in that process of trying, I think that is a good thing in itself, right? When you're experimenting or trying to work out what it is for you, that as a process, or as a what that brings into your day, your week, your month, whatever that is, I think that is good. That is good on its own, right? Because you're doing different things, you're finding out what you like doing. And yeah, ideally that ends up with you doing more of the things that you are then more passionate about, that you're then more interested in about. And great to have that as a goal, but enjoy the process along the way, right? Enjoy that experimentation, I think.
Yeah. I think your 20s particularly is more about doing as many things as possible to find the things that you're not interested in as much as the things that you are interested in. And I think there's been so many things that I've done over the last couple of years where I'm like, I have no idea if I'm even interested in this, but if I do it, at least I can tick that off as it being something that I don't need to invest more time in as well. With some of the coaching that you do with career professionals and I suppose everyday people, what are some of the questions that you ask them to help find the things that they are passionate about, or they care about, or want to invest more time in?
Yeah, so often you'll go through a process. I often break it into two bits. So there's kind of like the values, beliefs, motivations. So things that are inherently important to you that often don't change, or normally don't change actually over the course of your life. You know, these values and beliefs that are important to you. And if you can align your work or your career with those, then you're going to feel a lot more comfortable than if you don't have that alignment. And similarly, if you join a company that shares those values and beliefs, you're going to feel much more at home there than you will with a company with a culture that is kind of in contradiction with some of those values and beliefs. So that's kind of like the course. You go through an exercise in order to identify what some of those are. But then when it comes down to your day-to-day enjoyment of your role, yes, if you're doing something that is in alignment with your values and beliefs, that's great. But if the day-to-day activities are things that you just don't enjoy doing, but like what you just said, right? You try something out, and actually one of the things I'm trying to do is identify things that I don't want to do. Knowing what those are for you can then help you, if you're trying to move into a different role, or have a career in a particular industry, or whatever that is, more about the types of activities during the day that are going to make you excited to get up in the morning, or your point about sort of feeling energized at the end of the day. I think say, for example, you've got a role with really aligned with your purpose and your values, but all day you're doing, I don't know, data entry or something that you don't really enjoy doing. That's not going to work for you, right? Even though it's fully aligned with your values. And it could be that you're doing that particular task for a really noble cause that is making a real positive impact in the world, something that you really strongly believe in. Most people, that's not going to sustain them through Monday doing that, Tuesday doing that, Wednesday doing that every day. So it's a combination of that kind of core values, beliefs, what's important to you, but actually the practicalities. What are the tasks or activities that you're doing at 10 a.m. on a Tuesday? It's that sort of level of detail.
Couple of thoughts here. I had a guy, Colin, who was sat where you are now. I think he was episode maybe 4 or 5, and he said this thing that I think he said, you don't have to love everything you do, but everything you do needs to enable you to do the things that you love, which I really liked, because I was like, if I say, look at my job, I love my job, right? I don't love every single part of my job, but but those parts of like my CRM entry or data entry, doing follow-up emails, all this stuff, I don't love doing those things, but those things allow me to hit my targets, to connect employers with students from low opportunity backgrounds. Like, I love the fact that doing those rubbish things, those shit things, then enables me to do those things, and that enables me to live the life that I want to, having a podcast and having the money to do that as well. And I think that's quite an important thing to recognize. Another thing, I can't remember if we mentioned this on the prequel about the beta region paradox. Did we talk about that? Comes from Chris Williamson, the podcaster of Modern Wisdom. Went to his event at the Apollo just before Christmas. And he also says this on every single episode. And I'm pretty sure I've mentioned it on nearly every episode that I've done, because I love it so much. But the beta region paradox is this idea that, in the example of jobs, it's when you're in a job that you don't love, but you're doing it enough to just get by. It's unfulfilling and uncomfortable, but it's not severe enough to give you the motivation to go and do something different. If someone's in that position, or it sounds like the people that you work with might be in that type of position, how would you help them kind of move through this beta region paradox?
So you I think you're spot on. You don't actually need that much in your role that is the stuff that really kind of like fires you up, that you're really excited about, or that you're passionate about. There was a study done by the Mayo Clinic in the US a few years ago, and they reckoned it's 20% was kind of enough, in terms of like, if you broke down all the stuff that you're doing over the course of it. I think this is in the medical profession. They said, well, actually, if 20% of what you're doing is the stuff that kind of lights you up, then you'll put up with a lot of shit for the other 80% of the time. I think that the trick and that doesn't necessarily mean that you're in a role that you're not feeling fulfilled at, because that 20% can actually give you fulfillment in the role. take a step back and think, well, actually 80% of the time you're doing stuff that you're not actually that interested in. To your point, if it's getting me to, if it's enabling me to do this 20% of the stuff that I am really excited about, then that's often good enough. The trick is, how can I increase the 20% and, you know, decrease the 80%? And I think to a certain extent, if you're really good at the 20%, then chances are you're likely to do more of that over time, either in the role that you're doing or in the next role that you're going to do, because you typically gravitate towards the stuff that you're good at. And a smart employee will want to focus on those strengths that you've got in that 20%, for example, as opposed to other things that perhaps somebody else can do. If your employer's not recognizing that, you can either try and engineer that for yourself in your current role, or perhaps the next thing that you're going to do, you're going to try and dial up that 20% to 30% of the role or 40% of the role. I think it's rare. It's great to have it as an ambition, but it's rare that you're going to go, you know, from 20% to 100% in terms of, okay, you know, what's the like the Japanese ikigai thing, where, you know, you're doing the thing that you love, that, you know, people need, that you get
all
paid
the
for.
expectations.
Those four things,
Yeah.
like, that's unlikely for most people, but if you can get, you know, a decent amount of some of those, then that's normally a great outcome.
So 20%. So it only takes 20% of what you do, say, per day or in your job, to give you enough fulfillment to get through the 80%. So you're saying identify what that 20% is, and then look for that in other roles, other avenues, other expressions throughout your life.
Or how you can, or how can I dial up that in my current role? And typically it's the stuff that, because you enjoy doing it, you're normally good at it. So therefore, it can be easier to do more of that stuff in your current role, because, you know, typically your employer will want you to, you know, do more of that stuff that you're good at. That's one way, I think.
I think you mentioned something interesting earlier about the aligning these decisions to your core values and beliefs, and you mentioned that they're often a part of us for a very long time, and I think you said that they don't often change. I suppose, just to challenge that a little bit, some of those beliefs may be harmful / untrue beliefs, i.e., I'm not worthy of a job that gives me I'm not like challenging directly, it's more of a conversation point, but like, I'm not, say, worthy of this job. And I feel like a lot of people listening right now will be like, oh yeah, I'd love to get a new job that gives me more fulfillment, but like, that doesn't exist, that's not real, that's not a thing. Like, no one around me, or none of them in my family, like none of them really enjoy their jobs. That's just what life is, right? You just go to work, you do the thing. And I feel like that's quite a common thought process for a lot of people. What can people do to dissolve some of those harmful or perhaps untrue beliefs that helps them almost change their own identity and belief system to be able to move towards a new career or a transition, or even just a bit more fulfillment in life?
I mean, one of the things that you can do to kind of dissolve sort of limiting beliefs is you write down the statement of, you know, whatever the limiting belief is. So, for example, in that example, you know, I'm not, you know, I'm not confident enough to do this particular role, or I'm not experienced enough to do this particular role. And then you just go and look for and write down all the evidence that effectively is the opposite of that. So all of the stuff that you've done previously in your role to date, or stuff that you've done in your life, to give you effectively the complete opposite evidence to that statement that you've written down. And most people will be able to write down, you know, a lot of evidence from their life that effectively contradicts that limiting belief that they've got. And that's the first step in terms of kind of dismantling the taking the foundations out from the belief. And then when you tell yourself that story, which is untrue, you're then reminded of all the reasons why actually I've got some pretty good evidence that counters that. So, you know, if you're not confident to take that next leap, well, chances are you weren't confident to go into the role that you're currently in, or when you went into that role, you're thinking, I'm a bit out of my depth, or I haven't got enough experience to do that. So it's exactly the same situation you're in now. You've got those thoughts, but you've got some evidence from, you know, however long ago it was before you went into your current role that, well, actually, I didn't have the experience, or I didn't have the confidence, but it's actually worked out okay. And therefore that gives me the confidence to go into whatever it is I might be doing next, But yeah, just looking at it from the complete opposite end and finding some evidence in your life that kind of contradicts your own thinking. We're very good at our brains are very good at finding evidence to support some of those negative beliefs, and that's kind of like the default because our brain
negativity bias.
Yeah, because our brain wants to keep us safe, right? But you can proactively look at it from the complete opposite end and say, okay, well, what's some evidence that refutes this belief that I'm telling myself?
So you identify the limiting belief. I don't have enough. I'm not worthy, or I'm not smart enough to go into this role. You write that down and then build a stack of evidence against that contradicts it. And then, is there any work in then? That's almost like removing the thing itself. How do you form a new belief then? Is there any? Do you have to write down evidence then to say I am?
So you can do that.
This now?
So you can do that. I think actually the best way, take this example, right? You're wanting to do something that you're not necessarily feeling qualified to do or as confident to do. Once you've looked at the evidence that proves to yourself that actually, I have been able to deal with these sorts of situations in my life previously, actually taking some action is the thing that gives you the confidence. So the confidence doesn't come before the action. Taking some action in stepping into this, whatever this new thing is that you want to do, it's that normally gives you the confidence. Because most of the time, things either go okay, or if they don't go okay, you're learning something from it. And it's that process that gives you the confidence, as opposed to, I'm going to wait until I'm 100% confident to try this thing out. That'll never come, right?
It's the same with motivation, I find, as well.
Oh, yeah.
If I have something to do that I don't necessarily want to do, like, it's very rare that I just spontaneously become motivated to do the thing. It's only once I started doing the thing that the motivation kicks in. You get this dopaminergic reinforcement that comes in and helps you out. And it's almost the same then for confidence. You have to start doing the thing to build up the evidence to then have the confidence.
Yeah, and taking those small steps, right? So one of the ways that you can increase your motivation, or some ways that you can make it more likely that you're going to do something, to increase your motivation to do something, is you can increase the value, your perceived value of doing that thing. So if that is high, then my motivation to do the thing is likely to be higher, right? If I've got more confidence that I'm actually going to be able to achieve this thing, then that's going to increase my motivation. Now, one of the ways that you can make both of those things more likely is to break the thing down into smaller chunks and have a much, much shorter time horizon. So if you've got a really big goal that, something that you've never done before, okay, the value to you might be quite high, but the likelihood of you doing it, your confidence in being able to achieve that, is probably quite low. And that's going to really impact on your motivation to be able to do it. If you break down the goal into small chunks, most people have heard about, you break something big down into small chunks. One of the reasons that works is because it gives you confidence that I'm going to be able to do that smaller chunk, and therefore much more motivated to do that next small step. The other thing that it does is it makes the time horizon for getting the value from doing that small step much closer. And when you're going to get more sort of immediate gratification from doing something, again, you're more likely to do it. So that's why it's kind of the breaking it down into smaller chunks works. So that's, and yeah, just getting started on doing something, you do that, and then that builds your confidence in whatever that.
And you get momentum going forward.
Yeah, get the momentum.
I read a study by the Dominican University that only 3% of the population set goals, and only 1% actually ever write down their goals. And for those that do write down their goals, they're 42% more likely to achieve them. Which I think it's quite incredible, isn't it? The power of actually just like, it sounds so medial, just like writing your goals down, but it seems to have such a significant impact. If you're someone that doesn't necessarily write down goals now, how would you help them get started?
Well, so just on goal setting, why you're more likely to achieve a goal, I think that stat is probably there because the people who have done that, they're just much more intentional about what it is that they want to achieve. And the very fact that I don't know if it's the actual act of writing it down, but the act of thinking about what it is that I want to achieve, that means you're much more likely to then go and achieve it, as opposed to a lot of people don't really know what that is, don't define that, don't really think about it, aren't proactive in it, and kind of like just coast through, and things just kind of happen to them, right? So I think it's the thought process that makes it more likely you're going to achieve it. And what that then also does, going back to your point about negativity bias, you've told your brain that this thing is important to you, and therefore your brain starts to notice, signals, opportunities that you wouldn't have otherwise have noticed, just in your day-to-day experience.
Is that the reticular activating system?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's the sort of Stephen Kotler stuff that I think.
Yeah.
Right. So it's all of that where you've told your brain this is important. Your brain's got all this noise all day, every day, and it's like, okay, well, I see these opportunities, which mean it's then more likely that I'm going to be able to achieve that goal, because I told my brain that's important. The brain's noticing. The brain's pretty clever, right? It's noticing things that are going to help you achieve that, and therefore it makes you much more likely that you're going to achieve it. So I think that's part of how it works.
It's like the just for those that don't necessarily recognize the reticular activating system, it's almost like the neuroscience version of where people say manifestation.
Yeah.
So like the really good example of the reticular activating system, or RAS, and how it works is, let's say you're looking to buy a yellow car, for example. All you will notice for the weeks up until you buy that car is all of the yellow cars around you. And it's ultimately your brain still filtering the information that it takes in, because you can't take in all of the information. I don't know if you've ever seen those I guess it's like a scientific or psychological study on like the brain's attention, and they have this video of like maybe 10 people in a room, and they're all doing something peculiar. Like one of them is bouncing a basketball, another's like reading a newspaper but like going through the pages really quickly or whatever. And I think there's a question that asks you to like count how many times the basketball bounces. I'm kind of making it up a little bit because I can't remember the specific.
I know the one.
But there's a gorilla,
and
a guy in a gorilla suit walks through, and because your brain is focusing on counting whatever it's asked you to count, you don't even notice the fact that this gorilla has just walked across the screen.
Yeah.
And I think that's just a really good example of, if you can be more intentional with your goals, you're more likely to notice the opportunities in your life. And I think that's what you're saying.
Yeah, absolutely. The other thing that helps with the brain's identification of things that are going to be beneficial for you is gratitude journaling. So the reason that helps, so the two things that have been proven to help your brain dial down its negativity bias and identify things that are going to be more helpful for you. It's still going to have a negativity bias in terms of identifying things that are going to keep you safe. But one of them is goal setting and writing your goals down, so telling your brain this is important to me. The other one is around gratitude, and it's telling your brain that, these are things that are good in my life that I'm lucky to have, and this makes me feel great. You can't be annoyed or pissed off at the same time as being grateful. Like, it's just like you just can't do that. So you're telling your brain that these things I'm lucky to have in my life, I feel grateful for these, that makes me feel good. And again, then your brain will try and bring more of that, or identify more of those things from your day-to-day experience of all the data that it's going. So, right, okay, well, these things are going to be helpful for me. Sometimes where you start to get on a bit of a roll, right? It's a bit like your yellow car. But if you're you're focused on achieving something, you get into a bit of a role in it. Well, that's that situation happening because your brain is identifying these opportunities. They were there before, but your brain might not have necessarily identified them.
Actually noticed it. Yeah, I think gratitude journaling sounds wanky, but it's probably one of the most profound things that I've done. I've been, I'd say, fairly consistent for the last 4 or 5 years, and I'll usually go for a stage of like every day for like 4 months, and then randomly I'll stop for a month, and I genuinely notice the difference about the times that I'm consistent and I'm not. And some of the examples would be, when you're gratitude journaling at the end of the day, you have to reflect back on your day firstly to work out, okay, what's actually happened today. usually I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't actually go, what have I actually done
You normally just
today?
glad the day's
Just scroll on social media and
yeah.
like, but to actually stop and go, yeah, what did I actually do today? And I'm like, God, I'm so frazzled, I can't even remember. And it's like, okay, that's interesting. I hadn't even acknowledged that I am a bit frazzled today. Like, where's that come from? But also, what did happen that was good today? And then when you first start journaling and writing down, I think I write 10 things per evening or per day that I'm grateful for. And it's like the first few are always quite easy, right? Because it's like, the lunch that I had, or like my family, or like my friends. And you can't say those things every day. So you have to get hyper specific on what happened today. Someone opened the door for me at work. Someone offered to make me a cup of tea, or this chat that we're having now is going to probably be in the gratitude journal later. But the more I was doing that, on reflection, or in a moment of reflection, the more when I was actually in moments that I'm probably going to end up writing down. I'm actually sat there in the present moment going, I'm grateful. Like I'm enjoying this moment right now, and I'm feeling gratitude in the moment. Whereas when I first started journaling, it was only ever when I reflected on it. And I guess that's your brain's muscle, the neuroplasticity of it starting to form those connections that part of your default is to feel gratitude in moments that you should be feeling gratitude.
It's definitely a muscle that that you can train and that grows. I do something similar, but mine's really quick. I do it most days. I don't do it every day, but I just do 3 sentences on wins for the day. So I do 3 wins, 3 things I'm grateful for, and some days I do something that I've either learnt that day, or something that I want to learn. I don't do the learning bit every day, but if it's something that obvious comes to mind, it's like maybe I fucked something up in the day. I was like, right, I need to learn from that. Or maybe, there's something that has come up during the day. I need to learn something about this in order to help me with, something else. But I keep it really short, just because that means I'm much more likely to do it. One of the things I really like doing is I've got this book I'm doing it in at the moment. It's like just a little red, kind of like little notebook, and it's quite nice just to flick through it and see, okay, what was I grateful for, on the 20th of November, or what were some wins I had, on the 1st of December, whatever it is. It's just it's nice to do in the moment. It builds that muscle, as you say, but it's also quite nice to go back and kind of reflect on how far you've come. Because sometimes you get so caught up in the day to day that you don't necessarily take stock every now and then, or you don't as often as I think we probably should, to see how far we've come. And actually, when you've got something written down, you say, okay, right, yeah, that's cool. I can see what that is.
I feel like that links a lot to creating a work-life balance as well, because for a lot of people that listen to this podcast, maybe they're the type A's that are looking to achieve something, but they also recognize that they need to make sure that they've got other areas in their life that they're keeping in balance. And I found that some form of reflection and some form of gratitude journaling helps me keep a little bit more work-life balance, because else I never reflect on it. I never take stock of where I am as a baseline to then be able to make any changes. And I suppose for the person listening that's maybe heard this, they've heard us talking about setting goals and finding clarity in what they're passionate about, but maybe their work-life balance is absolutely in the gutter and it's affecting their fitness and their social life and their relationships and their work and their motivation for life. What are some of the most effective things that people can do to salvage some of their work-life balance back?
I think there's when I think about work-life balance in this context, I think if you're working on something that is important to you, that can be a great thing. And you can work 20 hours a day, really, really long hours, 7 days a week, whatever it is. If it's something that is important to you and that you get value from, that's balance to me. I think where you're not in balance is when you're spending a lot of time doing something that you don't necessarily want to do, or you're not getting as much fulfillment from, and that's stopping you from doing other things that would give you more fulfillment. I think that's the most likely situation for people when they talk about, most people, when they think about work-life balance, it's I'm spending too much time at work and it's stopping me from doing other things. I think if you're able to identify, maybe you haven't got that 20% that we talked about earlier in terms of the thing that's giving you sort of purpose or fulfillment from your role. But if you're doing something which you are excited about and that you're passionate about, you can work very long hours and you can think, actually, my life is perfectly in balance. Early on in my career, I worked crazy hours for the best part of 20 years. And I still work very long hours now, actually. Perhaps that's just an inherent sort of trait for me. But whilst I was doing that, so I worked quite hard and played quite hard. I wasn't sort of during my 20s and 30s sort of big into like physical fitness or mental health. That's only something that I've kind of got into now I'm in my 40s. But during my 20s and 30s, when I was working long hours, late nights, weekends, but also earning a good level of income that enabled me to do fun things with my friends and family when I wanted to do that, I didn't necessarily feel that I was out of balance, because the job was fulfilling. It enabled me to do other things in my life that were also fun. But it was long hours. I think if you're in a situation where you're working long hours or longer hours than you might want to, and you feel that your work-life balance is out of control, it's often because you haven't got fulfillment from the role that you're doing, or you're ending the day feeling that you could only be working 6-7 hours a day, which isn't necessarily a long day, right? But you could get to the end of the day, or you could feel that your work-life balance is out of control, because you'll feel you've wasted those 7 days, those 7 hours, or you haven't got fulfillment from those 7 hours. So I think a lot of work-life balance issues aren't really around sort of the amount of time that you're spending at work. It's the amount of fulfillment that you're getting from your role.
I think for me as well, I agree in a sense of if you're doing the thing that you enjoy, that gives you energy, then your life feels in balance because there's a level of fulfillment. I think there's an angle of you don't always still have enough time to work on other areas of your life. So if you're super career orientated, for example, are you still able to show up socially, romantically, fitness, for example? And for me, I realized that it's actually really hard to be really good at all of them and give all of them enough time and investment and concentration and attention all at the same time. And for me, it was more of how do I periodize parts of my life to I'm going to focus on this, like not one thing, but these 3 things. So for me right now, it's like getting my injury sorted, focusing on the podcast and doing work. I don't necessarily have as much time for my dating or my social life, for example, but I'm okay making those sacrifices, because I know at some point in the future, when things have settled down from another perspective, I can be like, cool, I've got 3 months ahead of me now. I'm going to have a little bit more fun. I'm going to go dating. I'm going to focus more time on my friends. So for me, that realization has only come recently of just like, what do I want to focus on now? Because I can't do everything.
Yeah, I think it's a really important realization, right? Because it's what time period am I looking at this balance over? And your time period, and the way you just described it, is many months, right? Sometimes people think, well, I've got to design the perfect day. I've got to get 8 hours of work in, got to get an hour in the gym, got to spend an hour with my friends, got an hour working on my son.
Social, 4% of fitness.
Yeah, whereas it just doesn't work like that,
Yeah.
right? If you're lucky, you might get all of those things over the course of a week. But I suspect for most of us, you're gonna have some of them dialed up or dialed down over the course of weeks, months, over the course of a year. Maybe 1 year, the only thing I'm focusing on is building my business. That is my number one priority. And actually, I know a lot of things are gonna sort of get deprioritized. That's a longer time horizon than a lot of people will do, but some people will do that, and they will feel completely in balance with what their needs are at that particular time. I think that proactivity, and like the way you described it, you've intentionally thought about, okay, well, these are the things that I'm going to focus on, and I know that's not going to leave enough time to do these other things, but perhaps in a few months' time, I'm going to be able to be in a position where I can dial those things back up again. I think about it for me. I didn't set any goals for the start of this year, but I set 5 priorities. And the reason I set priorities were because priorities are around what am I going to spend my time doing, as distinct from a goal, which is something that I'm going to achieve. I do have some goals that I want to achieve, but the most important thing that I'm focusing on is 5 priorities, because if I know if I do all of those things, well, I'll enjoy the process and they will get me a lot further down the road in some of these goals that I do have. If I focus on these 5 priorities, and if something doesn't tell you what though, if something doesn't hit one of these 5 priorities, chances are I'm not going to do it. You know, so all the opportunities that you get to do something, if it doesn't tick one of these boxes, not completely ruthless on it, but filter everything through that, like that, this priorities filter, and then you know, you're more likely to achieve these things that you want to achieve. So for me, they're so exercise, diet, and sleep, kind of the fundamentals for me in terms of physical and mental fitness. Exercise for me is as much a mental well-being tool as it is a physical well-being tool. I've then got the growth of my business. I've been running my own business for the last 2 years. And then I've got friends and family. Now, those 5 are not in any particular order. So it's not that, you know, friends and family come last and, you know, sort of diet comes first. But those are the 5 priorities that I'm focusing on for this year. And if an opportunity arises, or I get invited to something, or somebody wants me to do something, if it's not ticking one of those, I'm much less likely to do it.
I really like that. How do you communicate those boundaries or priorities to people that have perhaps offered you an opportunity or asked you to do something that doesn't align? How do you then communicate that to other people?
I tell them exactly the same way I've just explained it to you. Is having a conversation with somebody on LinkedIn last week or the week before, wanted to meet up for a coffee, and I basically said, look, I'm focusing on these priorities. It's actually for the next couple of months, in terms of I've got some very specific things I'm thinking. I'm focusing on for my business for the next couple of months. I said, look, this is what I'm doing for the next couple of months. I'm not really doing anything else for my business aside from these things. Perhaps we can, you know, meet up later in the year, but right now this is what I'm focused on. He came back and said, look, I'm really grateful for your clarity and honesty, and you haven't just kind of like fobbed me off. I think people appreciate that. When you're clear on what it is that you want, and you're just open with people about this is why I'm saying no to this, I think most people respect that, right?
So you're almost just offering an explanation. So I suppose for the person listening as well, it's like, oh, I can't go on that night out because I am prioritizing my fitness at the moment, for example.
Exactly,
or I'm
right.
prioritizing the podcast or my career or exploring this passion.
Yeah.
And I feel like we get caught in the trap of not wanting to annoy others or friends or relationships or dampen them. Excuse me. But I suppose if we can use this, it's almost like a set of rules as the excuse or the reason why behind your making
It's
this
the reason
decision.
why, yeah,
Help.
not an excuse,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
The
true.
reason, right? It's
Helps.
so if like your situation, you're focused on this podcast at the moment, right? And this is really important to you. So if you get invited to something and it clashes with you recording one of your podcasts, your friends or people who know that this is important to you will be like, oh yeah, of course that's totally fine, right? Because it's you're clear on what it is you're trying to achieve, and you're giving a reason aligned with that for why you can't do this other thing. And I think people respect that.
I can't believe the time's flown by already. I'm sure people listening now have learnt a lot around how they can find more clarity in terms of what they're passionate about, and understanding that it's not always plausible to always find these things, but it's our duty to find it. We've covered setting goals, building confidence, and work-life balance. If people want to find out more about you, they want to review some of the accelerator programs that you run, where can people find out more about you?
Yeah, best place to find out about me is mostynwilson.com, MOSTYN Wilson.com, or I'm on LinkedIn a lot. I think there's only one Mostyn Wilson on LinkedIn, so I'm pretty easy to.
You're pretty cool.
I'm pretty easy to find. So yeah, generally if you just search for Mostyn Wilson, it's a pretty unusual name. It's a very unusual Welsh name. I'm easy to find mainly through search. So.
And the Atomic Ambitions Accelerator that you run, what are some of the key things that you help people with on that?
Yeah, so Atomic Ambition is a new thing for me this year, and it's all about helping people define and realize big ambitions for themselves. So it's designed specifically for professionals and leaders, and it's an 8 week program. And at the end of 8 weeks, you'll be crystal clear on what your ambition is, what your next big career goal is. You'll have a detailed roadmap for how you're actually going to go and get after it, and you'll have taken confident next steps on that roadmap. So it's designed to take people who are a little bit either stuck in where their career is, or perhaps they know what the next big move is, but they're not quite sure how to go after it. It's designed to take those people over an 8 week period, so that at the end of the 8 week period, they're crystal clear on what they want, got a roadmap to get it, and they've taken the steps to started to take the steps to get after it. So it's
Sign me up. That sounds great. Cool. Thank you very much for coming.
Oh, it's great to be here. Thank you.